How can I love thee, Lord my God, with every breath I breathe? How can I love thee, Lord my God, with every breath I breathe? Just as a fire can burn, whole forest burn to the root my desire. Just as a fire can burn, a whole forest burn to the my desire. Just as a fire can burn, a whole forest burn to my desire. Just as a fire can burn a whole forest, burn to the root my desire. I'd like to read this poem for today's broadcast of the unpublished writings of Paramhansa Yogananda, and I'm one of your hosts, Nayaswami Hriman. And the poem I'd like to read today is called The Fire, and it was published in October of 1927 by Paramhansa Yogananda. Penetrating dense dark forests of ignorance, I created a path of light. First I set fire to a few frailties and bramble bushes of prickly desires. My fire grew. It spread through tall vanities, thick arrogances. The whole forest of the world's delusion is ablaze. The wild beasts of passions and mortal fears are burnt. Wading through the ashes of past human errors, I shall create a path for all. Just as a fire can burn a whole forest, burn to the root my desires. You know, there's a story Swami Kriyananda tells in his autobiography, The New Path, that one of Kriyananda's fellow monks, I think it was Norman Paulson, Norman said to Yogananda, to Master, he said, I don't think I have very good karma. Norman was subject to moods and various tests of that sort, and Yogananda very sternly and fiercely said, you must have very, very, very good karma to even want to know God. When I read this poem, what attracted me was the term, the fire. And I may come back to that term, the fire. But the point I want to say is that out of 7 or 8 billion people on the planet Earth, how many really want to know God? I mean, of those who might say that, how many do anything about it? Already we're talking very few, percentage-wise, of people. But among those, as Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita, out of 1,000, one seeks me. And out of those who seek me, one perhaps knows me as I am. It's not my point to discourage anybody, quite the opposite. It's my point that if you have that desire to know God, and I think you wouldn't be watching this if you didn't, you need to light a fire in yourself. One of the techniques that Lahiri Mahashaya taught, I'm sure he didn't make it up, I'm sure it's quite old, in fact I know it is a little technique he called the Navi Kriya. In Sanskrit, the term Navi is presumably the basis for our term in English, navel. I don't mean ships and boats, I mean the navel on the belly button. And it's called Navi Kriya. Kriya meaning basically meditation technique for our purposes. And Navi, navel Kriya, navel technique. And it involves doing a chin lock with your head down and silently chanting Om behind the navel at the Manipur chakra, as it's called, and so on. We teach it in some of our classes. And its purpose is to light that fire, because that particular area of the stomach is where we digest, of course. The energy of that chakra, the intelligence of that particular area, is the intelligence of digestion. What is digestion, metaphysically speaking, other than the ability to digest and draw nutrients, meaning to draw wisdom from the experiences of life? And on the Eightfold Path, the two lower centers are known as Yama and Niyama, are those experiences of life that that we have that can help teach us. And those are the things that we shouldn't do, and then the things that we should do, wisely speaking. But the fire then digests the knowledge and wisdom gained from life's experiences and converts them into the inner fire of wanting to go within yourself and know that truth that shall make you free. From the yogic path, the Manipur chakra is really the beginning point of meditation. On the Eightfold Path of the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali, it represents, the term used rather, is asana, meaning posture, meaning this is when we learn to sit up straight and be still. And that fire is partly the fire of the desire, the enthusiasm to do that, to be still and know, and partly the fire that we need to raise the energy. Fire is energy. Having digested and learned from the experiences of life, good and bad, then that fire converts that into the higher power, the ability. In other words, what we've learned provides an incentive, the motivation to learn more, the motivation to refine, like a smelter, an alchemist, refining the raw materials of life's experiences into the finer precious gold of wisdom. And on the yogic path, I don't mean to confine it to the practice of yoga, but this is how we articulate this, because it's true on the spiritual path everywhere, is a question of raising our energy and offering it to God. So it's the same everywhere, but in the yoga terminology, we raise the light and the fire of prana, of life force within ourselves. We go within and we raise that energy, that vitality, that fire, that enthusiasm, really. It's a spiritual kind of enthusiasm, and we raise it upwards and offer it. We offer the little self of our life force contained in this vessel of the body, in this tabernacle. We raise that energy and offer it at the spiritual eye, offer it to the soul, offer it as a representative of the spirit. And the soul also is representative of the inner wisdom intelligence of the Christ or Krishna consciousness. And so this igniting the fire is, although not the first stage on the spiritual path, it is certainly the first stage on the inner path of awakening. Again, I don't mean to say that the inner path is different from some other path, although there are different ways of achieving enlightenment, but ultimately, in the deepest sense, we all walk that same path. It's 3.5 feet long. It's our spine. It's the raising of our awareness from the material centers of consciousness in the lower part of the body to the higher, more spiritual centers of consciousness in the body, all the way to the spiritual eye, ultimately up to the soul at the top of the head. This is true for everyone. Some saints achieve their enlightenment through humanitarian service offered to God, others through contemplation and so on. But what happens, even with those other, quote, paths, is that it draws the energy up. The movement of energy upwards is a universal reality of our spiritual awakening. But the point I want to make for today is it takes that fire, and that fire has both negative and positive. Negative is to shed from one's habits and actions, setting fire to a few frailties, bramble bushes of prickly desires, tall vanities, and thick arrogances. We have to do our, as I keep repeating, the via negativa, we've got to do our work. We've got to overcome our attachments and egocentric habits and tendencies. When I say overcome, I don't mean like you slay that dragon and then you can go on. I mean that I'm just saying that it's part and parcel of the upward awakening. After all, our final liberation is only the consequence of 25% of our effort. It's the rest of it, 75% is grace. Part of that is Guru's grace, and the rest of it is divine grace of God. So we do have to do our part with that fire. But more important, and particular to the new dispensation of spiritual awakening that I have often been referring to on this program, that was a term that Yogananda used to describe what he brought to the world and to the West. The more positive part is the devotion and the truth-seeking, the enthusiasm to meditate, to be still, to receive, and in an outward way, that enthusiasm and creativity and vitality is applied to serving God through other people, in our families, in our local communities, and in the work we do, and in so many ways. As Jesus put it so profoundly, quoting the Old Testament, the two commandments of God, the two branches of spirituality universally, is to love God with heart, mind, body, and soul, or whatever he said. In other words, with all our strength. And the other is like unto the first, to love our neighbor as ourselves. We are one, you see. And so the heart and the basis, the foundation, it's like cooking, you gotta start a fire, whether that be an electric stove or a gas stove or a campfire. You have to light a fire. You have to want to know God, you see. That's why Yogananda said to that despondent devotee, even to want to know God puts you on the track of desire fulfillment. All desires must be fulfilled. And when with fire and enthusiasm we awaken the desire to know God, Divine Mother has to fulfill our wish. She's the genie that comes out of the bottle that we find within ourselves. We rub the bottle, which is to say the different intelligences that are contained within the subtle body known as the chakras, and out pops, you might say, an intelligence that can guide us, a light, a color, a sound, a particular vibration, and particular kind of wisdom specific to each of those centers awakens. So, penetrate dark forests of ignorance, create a path of light, set fire to a few frailties, set fire to bramble bushes of prickly desires. Let that fire spread over tall vanities and thick arrogances. And let the wild beasts of passions and fears be burnt. And then Yogananda says, wading through the ashes of past human errors, note how he ends this, I shall create a path for all. You see, it's not just for himself. And our spiritual awakening is not just for ourselves. As Swami Kriyananda said when he was inspired to travel to meet Yogananda at age 22, he said, I had two desires. One, to know God through this great soul, this Guru. And the second, and I will add, is like unto the first, to share that wisdom, that truth with all. All right, great souls, light a fire. Okay, in the winter. Bless you all.